Welcome to Public Affairs, Public Access at the Houston Media Source here in Houston, Texas. I'm your host tonight, Robert McKinley Gilmore Sr. It's just a blessing to be here. This new year has cranked up and it's gone, and we're hopefully going to let you share with some of the roundtable discussions we're going to have this year, and this one is the beginning, mental health. I think we should all recognize in America and around the country, the globe, in fact, there are so many of us who are impacted by mental health issues. But we want to get you some help. And I have a distinguished round table. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and thirdly give you a tidbit of their interests and professional skills that they bring.
I'm Jacqueline Davis Gilmore, and I have my own company, Joland Communications, which focuses on women's issues and helping young girls and collegiate girls and homeless women.
I'm Reverend Dr. Carl Matthews of Life Ministries, Senior Servant. Our focus is quality of life, financial empowerment and enrichment, and also to address social ills that affect communities and families. And I'm also glad to be here as well.
My name is Dr. Napoleon Higgins. I am CEO and President of Bay Point Behavioral Health Service, also President Black Psychiatrists Greater Houston, and co-author of Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities. I'm here to talk about mental health, psychiatry, and how to move forward.
I'm Sir Demis's Truth, executive producer of the award-winning talk show People's Politics. Right here, I'm just coming to voice the opinions of the people because it's always about what the people have to say. And I want to thank you for inviting me to be a part of the panel today, Mr. Gilmore.
I'm so glad to have you and everybody else. Let me start with a definition I've used consistently. It comes from the World Health Organization, and the definition is based around mental health. And it says this: as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. I think that definition certainly gives credence to what we're talking about, and certainly to help you as a family member, those of you who are in organizations. We've had several incidents, not only in Houston, but around the country, of employees who go postal, as the term is, in terms of affecting other members on their jobs or whatnot, or people who don't have the capabilities to watch after their children. And they've had some cases, horrific cases, where people have killed their own children. And what I'm saying to you, and this is one thing I hope that the panelists will give us some insight to, is what can we do to identify, and what can we do to help people, and what can we do to stop influences? I know certainly with the media, that's a huge influence, and we know that our society, if it's going to remain civil, has to have some means to keep people sane. So let me start off by asking Dr. Matthews, who was recently in a discussion with the governor of the state of Texas, what was the view and opinion of our Governor Greg Abbott?
Well, thanks, Dr. Gilmore. I was very pleased to be invited there with the Community Leaders Summit. The invitation was extended throughout the state of Texas, and about 70 of us was there on President's Day. And the governor shared his plan. One was to address the issue of unemployment. He realized that unemployment has decreased. However, it's those who still have barriers as a result of them being incarcerated, returning back into the community. Also those who have become graduate of high school with diplomas but no life skills. And he was promoting the need for more entrepreneurship, more business owners. And what I thought was very interesting, and he also shared the word redemption in our conversation personally, but how transparent he was. And he admitted that the government had attributed 90% of the barriers that prohibited people or citizens of the state of Texas from being successful in the workplace and other things. And he gave some examples relative to cosmetology class. 1,500 contact hours required as a cosmetologist. 1,800 to get into a degree program and graduate. And he was just simply making the point how much time is spent in barriers. I didn't know that you needed a certification to be an interior designer to put red on the wall, blue paint on the wall, and texture on the wall. And so it was these type of barriers that he felt that was prohibiting people from excelling. He talked much about the need for apprenticeships, vocational training, which we know our former superintendent eliminated the vocational training aspect in our high schools. And we know we talked about that often, how much that was important and relevant to us in terms of our transitioning into the workforce. And even sometimes while we was in high school, we were employed in high school, and when we transitioned into real life situations, we had a job.
Well, let me ask you, you make that point about education, and so is it a possibility that the governor really recognizes now that the education system is not as diversified for people who are graduating? So you graduate, everybody's not going to college, everybody is not going to a 4-year program, and is it something that the state and others are beginning to recognize? Because I hear that all the time about it's not enough trained people in the trades and whatnot.
Right.
And particularly for African Americans, I'm being as specific as possible, who have deficiencies in terms of education.
Absolutely. And one of the things that was pointed out was the need for also to have more corporations and companies to be more involved with partnering and teaming up in a very creative. Everybody's talking about innovativeness and creativity, which I love, because that suggests to me we don't have to color within the box in order for it to be accepted for people to get help that they need to function in the workforce.
Now, you said that he realizes what's going wrong, but were there any solutions to that problem? Because I'm hearing about them still trying to take control of HISD away from the local control and take it more to Austin, which to me would only create a bigger divide from what we need in our community. So is he giving any suggestions, or was it just something that he came up with, a good talking point?
Well, he really didn't go into details and really touch much with the HISD situation and the turmoil that's going on. Okay. However, if you're involved and you engage in those that crisis and that dynamic, you know that there's a focus there. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be some involvement. Now, the thing about his initiatives is that it has to go to legislation for it to be accepted as a policy.
Correct.
To be in effect. So he's asking for help and support for these initiatives to be accepted. He also talked about the second chance situation. And, quite frankly with you, I was even allowed to give an opportunity of my experience as a reentry person back into the society as a result of a criminal background history. And I shared with him how I had been prohibited from coming into the workplace. And I mentioned the agency, which is under the auspices of his leadership, which is the State Board of Insurance. And so we talked about that, and certainly he offered all of his resources to get me the assistance that I need, and we're talking more about how we can make a change with that. And another thing, and my final point, and you can move on with other guests, Dr. Gilmore, is that he also opened up, I never heard this or seen this in leadership in government, where he opened up for areas of interest for appointed positions in certain committees.
Okay.
And I think there needs to be more presentation of us in these areas to see what's going on so that we the boots on the ground. And so I think they need another perspective of those barriers that we're faced with and become sensitive to the needs of our community, right? And so if we're there and we're present, if we don't compromise or applicate our responsibility to share that, I think we can be very effective. So I think we can do more at the table than standing outside in the yard.
Let me allude now to the professor, the educational background. How do you envision this governor's interpretation if you would. You're an educator, been there for many years, and work with at-risk youth.
Yes, and reentry programs, and that's one thing that stood out to me when you mentioned about reentry programs. I used to do volunteer work at several reentry programs, and I have noticed, if you fast forward now, I do not see a lot of reentry programs, at least in Houston and the surrounding areas. And so I think that that's good. If something like that can be initiated and implemented
Sure.
Throughout various
But are the institutions ready to take the responsibility with youth and young adults who have behavioral related issues? And we're going to go to the psychiatrist shortly, but let's be frank, everybody is not cut out for certain
Population.
peripherals, and everybody is not ready because they haven't dealt with prior issues which impact them. I mean, do you see that as a reality?
I think it's something to consider,
Right.
but I think that right now, in terms of the universities and colleges, perhaps, that there are other more prevalent issues that may stand out more. There may be, when children or young people have behavioral issues, they've got already things lined up for them. Re-entry into a re-entry program may not be the correct title or destination for them. They'll have other alternative methods for them, not that right now. What I would be interested in seeing from a women's issues perspective, which I have not seen in years, would be reentry programs geared towards women. I did volunteer community service at some at-risk schools for middle school and high school and college. And a lot of those young ladies needed more than just what the schools were offering. So I would be interested to know if there was any re-entry programs for women, even those women who were going through transition or who were homeless that I deal with on a daily basis. And in terms of volunteering, what type of alternatives or opportunities are there for them in terms of reentry programs that could possibly help them get reestablished with career enhancement, career exploration, interview resume skills, the whole business attire and so forth. But I think that that's a good start that the governor is trying to make.
But part of that reentry process as well, because I also have worked for several reentry facilities here in the Houston area, and one thing that I notice is when you start at the beginning, now you have the school districts that are classifying students as early as the 3rd grade and putting them in the system. We recently just had, I believe it was an 11-year-old who was arrested for disturbing the peace for not doing the pledge. So how do they then re-enter into society? Because once they get, labeled and once they get a record, then that eliminates their possibility for grants, for scholarships, for them to get into college for that technical school. And oftentimes they're denied entry into those technical programs and those vocational programs because they've already been deemed to be a problem. So how do we first correct that problem to be able to get them into that? Because
I think that's a good point, man, because one of the things that he talked about was as long as those violations, for lack of a better word, are not violent crimes, that he didn't feel that those type of barriers and stipulations need to prevent anyone from being able to progress.
So then we can classify those as youthful indiscretions as a terminology I've heard.
Well, let's think about it. I mean, sometimes when I'm talking to some youth at a certain age, I can't even process their perspective many times, right?
Yeah.
And so even with the point you're talking about from the 3rd grade, not the inability to be able to read to the pipeline to the prison, one of the guys who focused on education, Johnny Moloch, mentioned the fact that the 1st grade, because by the time you get to the 3rd grade, it's almost too late. And I think before we had a conversation with one of the psychiatrists who said you might need to even start when the woman is carrying the baby.
True.
In terms of how they conceptualize the thing. I see Doc nodding his head over here.
Yeah, well, the truth is that the child's IQ and ability to learn is based upon the mother's vocabulary. So essentially, it is shaped in the womb on what's going to happen outside the womb. And really, you reading to your child
Yeah.
I tell people just turn on an audio tape, put it on.
the headphones.
Put it on the headphones, you know. That actually is increasing the intelligence of the child. Sure. Realizing that the reason the school starts at the age of 5 is because that's when you're potty trained by. You can teach a child to learn and read at the age of 3. You don't have to wait until 5 years of age. So often they're so far behind. If your child is entering school in the 1st grade and they can't read, they're way far behind. They've lost 24, 36 months to another child, and you're saying that. And the fact is that school, prisons and jails are based upon what the educational level at the age of in the 3rd grade, at 8 years of age. So if your child has already learned how to read, you already decreased the risk that they're going to get incarcerated if they've already shown up to school reading. All right? So we have to look at that, and then also, when you look at reentry, you have to look at addressing mental health.
That's right.
The lowest numbers you'll read is about 1/3 of persons who are incarcerated, who are locked up, have a mental health issue. Some would say if you add in substance abuse, that's 50%. Some others would say it's as high as 70 to 80% when you combine mental health with substance abuse issues. So the majority of what we're locking up in the United States is a public health issue that we're making criminal, and then when we let you out of prison or out of jail, you're going right back into the same throes of the issue that got you put in there in the first place. So if there's not a provision to actually address mental health and those issues, you're looking at being re-entered back into the to the jail and prison system. The fact is that people need to have their mental health taken care of. If you can get them a job, all right, a safe place to live, and food, generally people stop committing crimes. So essentially that comes with vocational training, the mindset to be able to handle the world and the outside, a safe place to live and food, and people become model citizens.
And I think that's one of the points that the governor was really pointing out. People who opt out of the sin business, such as sell drugs, heroin, opioids, marijuana to the general public, and choose to work, get in the workforce, should not be penalized once they've already did the time for the crime.
Well, and also you got to look at what we're spreading to our youth, especially inside the inner city, where you need to do crime in order to make money.
Yes.
I'm like, listen, drugs are not making that kind of money anymore.
No.
All right, that was a time in the 80s where you made a lot of money, and most of the people got shot and locked up.
Right.
But now, what are you making, $100, $200 a day? Because everybody around you is selling as well.
Right.
So that's not a profit in that. Go get a job. Or go sell something else. Go cut a yard. Go wash your car. Go help fix somebody's sidewalk. All those things go into making money. I guess you can call it hustling, but it's really legit money. But also the ability for society to forgive people for being locked up because of criminal behavior, and also realize that not everybody who's locked up did a crime.
That's right.
It's your inability to defend yourself.
Right.
So often is the reason why you're locked up.
Well, that comes down to the social-economic issue then, because not only, using an example, let's say your local neighborhood drug dealer, once he gets arrested and he's saying, the reason I'm doing this is because I have 2 children, by 2 different women, so now I have to support 2 households. But as soon as they're locked up, then they lose the car, they lose the source of income for both of those kids. Now those kids cannot afford to go to child care. So like you said, now those are underneath the age of 8, so now you have 2 more who are not getting a proper education. So the mothers of those 2 children are probably not going to be able to go to work. So now you have another person in the system. So it not only affects that one, it affects the total community.
But I'm gonna say something to that, man, that I don't think I've ever heard anyone say. We may have it private discussions, but tonight I'm gonna go public with it, Doc. Is that point that you just made is not from the outside in. Although we know drugs come from the outside, overseas, whatever, but it's perpetuated by our own people and our own self.
Correct.
We inflict that pain and destruction and depravity on our own children because you got the older brothers and sisters who are recruiting younger brothers and sisters, taking advantage of their socioeconomic disadvantaged situation. You see, so that's a mental problem all by itself.
I was just going to say that. Do you consider that? I guess I'm going off to another thought, but it's still relevant. Do you consider that cultural, subcultural, or a mental illness?
I wonder if some people are, I wouldn't call it mental illness, in that you're adapting to your environment, you're just making a lot of bad decisions. sometimes you can have that counterculture that runs against what you would think would be positive for you and others. You have the counterculture, but also when it comes to, and I've never been a part of the drug game, but the understanding that once you're in, it's not like you can easily leave. You know, that's not a retirement plan. You know, so essentially once you're in and you're inside the system and you know X, Y, and Z, now you're a pawn of the system. You know, as I say, you're now in the trap house itself. Now you can't get out the game, and your only way is to recruit more, because sometimes that's pressure on you to keep going. Even if you want to quit and stop, you're not always let out of that game.
I guess one of the other elements, and this is for you, Nemesis, because of the influence of media, the influence of music,
Correct.
the influence of
television, media, movies, all of that comes into play, and that's another part of the cycle we need to break as well. It's conflicting, even for me,
right,
as a gentleman with 2 daughters.
Right.
If I'm taking my daughter to school and I turn on the radio and I hear Cardi B or any of these other popular songs, and what they're promoting in these songs is not what I want my children to grow up representing. And so we have to either eliminate that whole part of the culture, how they say the culture vulturing part of the media from our families, or we need to instill stronger values, 7 times stronger than what the outside world is putting on our children. But like I said, if we have to work 2 and 3 jobs, then we have to maintain a household. It's difficult because then there's other outside influences, especially when you put them in a schoolhouse where they're 8 hours a day, and everybody got a cell phone, and that's all they sitting there at lunchtime, listening to
or looking at the video.
And looking at the video.
They're online when it came out. They're online when it came out. They saw it pop up.
We can't even show the video tonight.
They got in trouble on the station before. They got in trouble on the station for showing that type of material before. So
and
we
that's
can't
that
show
generation. That's a different generation. There's several generational differences we're familiar with. That's that generation, and a lot of kids know it better. And college kids, they know that lingo and that language better than perhaps they know their own assignments.
Well, I'm getting to the point, though. I'm going to your observation, Matthews. Is sin or what? What's
the
evil?
business?
No, I'm saying sin or the evil.
Which is worse?
Well, that sounds like a rhetorical comment.
Or evil.
Oh, the thing about I found with people who are ill, once they get better, sometimes the evil and the sin portion of them may stop.
Okay.
So the question is, are you within your wherewithal to be able to make decisions?
Right.
And some people are well within their wherewithal to make decisions. They just choose to make the wrong decision over and over. Right. You have those who are in the throes of an illness that you can have loss of impulse control. There is a sin nature, and I think there's an evil nature. I think sin allows for there to be forgiveness, but evil is something that's innate. That's I would say this in us all.
Right.
That we always have to fight those other impulses of bad decision making.
Right.
So is that a mental illness when you consistently continue to make those choices, or if you don't have any other option but to continue to make those choices?
When you're making a choice that does not benefit you or help you in any way, normally at that point I'm thinking this may be a mental illness, in that there is not a good outcome. If there's not a pleasurable outcome that at least feels good.
Right.
And you're making a decision. To me, at that point, my mental health side of me is clicking on that this actually may be illness, because it's kind of like, why would you do something that leads you nowhere, that you get no benefit from?
Yeah. So if we go back to what Dr. Gilmore read about the World Health Organization, the inability to cope with
the normal
stresses, I think causes unstable emotions, right? That evil then promotes the sin thought process of things that you can do that can harm yourself and harm others. So that would be a mental thing, because if I'm selling drugs And if I'm consuming drugs,
Right.
then I'm hurting myself as well as others. So I kind of fall in that description.
But what if that's the normal behavior pattern for your environment? Because like you said, like it says, the normal pattern,
Stress,
right?
yeah.
Some people, that's all they know. For 3 generations, they stayed in the projects, and all they seen was the daddy, the uncle, the grandfather, even the grandma, auntie. All of them sold dope out the same place, and they got multiple records, 17 feet long.
Sure.
If that's all that they're accustomed to know, and they doing that 3 doors to the left and 2 doors to the right,
Yeah.
what other choice or options do they have?
Well, I mean, we had options. We had choices, right?
Correct.
In my community, 3rd Ward, which I'm proud of, it was on the same street, the next street,
Right.
friends, associates, what have you. However, I made a decision that I didn't want those consequences, which was incarceration
Right.
or having to look over my shoulder. It doesn't mean that I wasn't tempted with some of the things
Correct.
and
Right.
benefits I saw others,
Yeah.
sharing and what have you. But again, it comes back to me making a personal choice about what I want in my life, and I think I think that people have. So we have to educate people and inform people that there are other options and count the cost of decisions and life choices.
I'm going back to the idea of how young do you have to be to get that? I mean,
Correct.
I heard Dr. Higgins, I heard what you said about the, the tapes, the reading of. But the reality is, how young, particularly when you got situations where parents or family members are in the culture and it is not a norm. And then in our community, we got so many
Correct. Where it does
biological,
seem like it
genetic,
is.
environmental factors, which impede that logical. See, we thinking very logical
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
But when we leave, we see stories which are illogical. Cameras running everywhere. Here you running into the Whataburger, like going through the drive-through window is a job trying to get to the cash register. That is not logical.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense. Or assaulting somebody or whatever the case is. And oftentimes we ask ourselves, well, what made you do that? What made you do that? You didn't want, the school is offering educational programs, people are offering support services at churches, or you have, nonprofit. Well, and so you decide that you're not going to go in any of those records. Because I don't see you riding a Bentley after 3 Whataburger
Jobs.
CVS takedowns.
Exactly.
I don't see that happening. So what
What do we do to
what
change?
film are you watching to influence you? I mean, that's the question mark.
I would say it's the influences. When you're listening to these radios and you're hearing what these young folk are saying on these songs, on how essentially, I can't, started from the bottom, now I'm here. Well, a whole lot of processes went in that.
Right.
You're looking at a man with a 20-year career.
Right.
That started quite early.
Right.
But even on top of that, you've got young guys who, this is your first hit song, and you driving Lamborghinis and yada yada yada, realizing that's the record company stuff.
Right.
But we sell these things to kids, not realizing that you can actually go to school and buy one.
Right.
They'll sell you one.
Right.
You go to school, make good money, but the problem with going to school and making good money is that all of a sudden you don't want a Bentley. It does. It's not worth the money at that point. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I can go buy one, but then how am I gonna eat? And I'm back in my grandmother's house. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So mentally you're in a different space when you actually have earned the money to do that. I think it's a lot of those outside influences and not being able to see enough professionals such as ourselves. Even I look at growing up, Sunnyside, Hiram, Clark, even moving out to Missouri City later, but in South Acres, a lot of those guys are dead.
Right.
And they weren't bad folk.
Right.
They weren't bad kids. You would think they were some kind of gangster format. No, we went to BTU and Sunday school and stuff like that.
Right.
But they made bad decisions, and it was about fast money.
Right.
And I think really what's killing our community is this fast, unearned money. People believe that you're supposed to make fast money and come up quick. And everybody out there who's a professional knows that it's a grind.
That's right.
The whole thing is a grind from the beginning.
It's a grind.
You know, coming home, going to school, doing your homework. I'm like, listen, you know, knew someone who had bought their kids some Gucci or shoes or something like that, and going to school in the hood, and everybody's now looking at them a little bit differently. Folk have a different conversation about them. Now people are putting stuff on the Instagram posts. It's like, you know what? Listen.
Breaking into their locker.
Yeah, stealing stuff from that. They were looking over their back and all that. And I'm like, listen, just go and get some medium price pair of Nikes from Famous Footwear. Look clean every day. Match.
But if you really want to put it out there, it's not only with our culture. If you really look at it, it's beyond that. Simple fact, they say the economy is doing so great. Payless is filing for bankruptcy. To answer that point. But yet we'll see a line of individuals that'll sleep out in the rain to spend $200 on a pair of Jordans when they come out. But these aren't the same people that's breaking down the doors to go vote. The same people that's not breaking down the doors to go get an education, because it's not worth it. You want to fit in to society. You want to, you want, individuals want to fit in or either stand out. And it's going to be one of the two. If you don't portray yourself to be above that economic barrier and set aside, you can't come to the club in a, you can come to the club in a Altima. But if you come to the club, like you say, in a Lamborghini, you gonna get way more attention. So that's part, you know, and I think they've probably been talking about this for years. I mean, decades. I mean, as long as I've known, my parents always taught me, you know, go to work and that's why you're supposed to do it. But at the same time, some people will say selling drugs is work. Some people say hustling is work. And they do that, and just trying to stay alive in that game in itself is work. I'm not saying it's, I'm not trying to justify it.
And it doesn't last long.
It forces you to retirement early.
Well, so it must be another level, because we talk about mental health. So it must be another level then prior to getting to a diagnosis stage.
I would think you're right, Doc. And you know, I've had this conversation on numerous times with different people. We just dissecting it, trying to figure out how do we change this situation and culture and mindset. And it always traces back to the home. The dynamics of the family. We know it's not the same as it used to be 50 years ago. You know, even the idea of 70%, I think, of the households don't even understand the concept of prayer and what that even means. Now it's a spiritual higher power, it's yoga, it's everything but prayer. You know, it's giving credence to the sun, not the S-U-N, not the S-O-N, you know. But our struggles as a community, as a race, historically has always been the foundation of the church and our spirituality. And although there are different aspects even in the black church, because you have Baptist, Methodist, Kojic, and so forth, but still was a spiritual foundation. And even in my transition back into the community, although I was tempted with those same things, you know, I opted out from doing those things of you know, getting the quick money to sustain myself. You know, it was a deeper part of me that grandmother taught me about faith, trusting God, hope, understanding that you're better than that. So I think some of there's a lack of perspective about your value, about who you see you are, you know, who you are. And even I would say that's mental instability. Even if you're trying to, if you lost and you're trying to fulfill this self-image of some other person by wearing name brand stuff, you know. Because I remember buying a suit for $1,800, and afterwards I only wore it one time. Only I knew it cost $1,800, and I had to check myself and say, what in the world was I trying to do?
What were you thinking?
Yeah. So I was trying to give some type of illusion of me being this person that I wasn't by what I wore. So when I start focusing on what was on me and what's in me, and not start focusing on how my hair look and what's in my head, then you start changing how you think and how you process and the decisions and life choices you make. And I think we just have to get to the root cause of that kind of situation. That's not the school responsibility, I don't think.
Correct.
It's not HPD responsibility. So whose responsibility?
Like you said, it's an individual and it's the family's responsibility, but then you also touched on something that goes onto it as well, and that's the lack of religious and spiritual guidance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times in the churches now, you have the perception that if it's the Catholic Church, that they're afraid of being molested. Then in some of the black churches, you have the prosperity preaching. So when the pastor is coming to the church in 2, 3, 4 different Bentleys, they buying him and his wife matching Bentleys for their anniversary. Are they putting in on the prayer list, we need new blades for our chopper? You know, then you got, call it what it is, it's reality.
Right.
That's the reality. So when people go there, that's what they're looking at. Oh, well, I know if I follow his God, then I can have fast money and it's going to be wealth immediately unto me.
And I'm glad to be at the table on this discussion because I don't know if that's exactly the reality. That might be the perception of a reality, because when you talk about people like that in the faith ministry, you're only talking about a very small percentage who does that. When you look at the 97% of faith-based leaders, many of them riding hoopties, struggling, wearing the same suit, tape unglued in the suit, the whole 9 yards. And sometimes people have a perspective that when the preacher is poor, he's a good pastor, or poor looking, he's a good pastor. Well, you know, if I serve the king who's the master of houses and land, 1,000 hills and so forth, you know, why should I look like I'm an outcast? And so it's a mindset as well. Now, I do agree with you that we have not done all we could do and should do in having innovative approaches with partnerships with the private sector to be able to provide ministries that meet the needs of our parishioners and our community. Now, we can do a much better job in that aspect.
And also your spirituality is a protector of your mental health too.
Yeah.
You know, so having a church home, a church family, people you can turn to, folk who call, check in on you, to believe that there is someone bigger than you or somebody bigger than the situation who can come through, and no matter what is going on, can come through. It's something that's actually protective to your mental health. And as you look, you know, as America gets further and further away from God, black people are getting further and further away from God. And not seeing the importance of it because of the influence. So often we are hearing about our individual, you know, self-help, self-determination, yada, 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 and not working on the collective of what the collective can do versus what the individual can do. The collective can do a whole lot more. But right now, we're kind of more or less focused on our individual selves. And it's very hard to move everybody forward that way. You have folk like that in their own house.
That's right.
It's about them.
That's right.
And not about the home. You know,
Do you see this on the educational side?
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, and within the church, based on what you were saying, Dr. Matthews, the resources, those resources, when I was growing up in my home church, the resources were there for us in the church. And so those resources kept us out of trouble. Don't get me wrong now, you know, children, we did our everyday, daily mischief, whatever. But there were Sunday school programs for us. There were summer school programs.
Vacation Bible School.
For vacation Bible school.
Trips.
What field trips. You went
Church
places,
trips,
church trips, and you sung in the choir. Okay, you don't want to sing in the choir, then there's something else for you. But those resources were already implemented. Those educational resources were already implemented in the church. Certainly by no means am I saying anything bad about the church. I'm married to a pastor, so I can't. And then my brother is a pastor, so I got to be careful. You know, but you know, a lot of people want to put that blame or that fault on the church, and it does start at home. My mother was a single parent. I'm the product of a single parent. My father was abusive, but he was a hard worker. He was a hard worker in construction. And at the end of the day, when he came home, it was his beer, it was his alcohol. But what happened, unfortunately, he did not know how to channel that. You know, I can sit down and have a glass of wine and I'm okay and I'm relaxed. Some people, my father, may he rest in peace, he channeled that aggression and that anger out on my mother. And I'm a witness that when children see that type of aggression in their parents, when they are little, even if it's the change of the voice, tone tone of the voice or the nonverbal, the hands, they remember that when they were older.
Yeah.
I remember everything that my father did in terms of his voice and his language. When my sister and I would accidentally lock ourselves in the bathroom and the lock was broke, so you're stuck in the restroom, and my mother screaming and hollering, getting them out, and he's standing there laughing. And so therefore, as I'm an older, educated woman, if somebody laughs at me, I go back and I think about that. That's my psyche. That's my mental illness. And the person may not be laughing at me.
Yeah, right.
They may be laughing with me, but my perception is I see you're laughing at me the way my father laughed at my mother when the children were locked up. So, but she kept us, our foundation was grounded in the church. The church provided those resources, those trainings and that education for us. I think that's missing, but I don't blame all the churches for that. I think it starts at home.
Yeah.
Let me go to the observation, because the media has had such an influence. I mean, the social media world, I specifically remember one late Lucius New Professor of Texas Southern saying to us, in the future there will be so many outlets that people can become educated or just ask Google or whatever. You know what I mean? You're not gonna tell me about the birds and the bees. I'm gonna ask the
Google.
computer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, it has become so. Where is that going?
It's going to people are not going to have to interact with one another. And the less interaction that humans have with each other, the more distant, the more self-sufficient or self-reliant individuals come. It's like, you think about it. You can go to the bank. You go inside the bank, they have a teller now inside the bank.
Right.
So you don't even have to interact with the individual. You go to a fast food restaurant, they got machines now that they'll do your order. You don't even have to talk to the people.
Right.
So not only is it going to make individuals stop communicating and dealing with individuals, but it's also going to eliminate jobs. And those are the jobs that a lot of the people who they say they create these jobs, these low-paying minimum wage jobs that the people from the reentry programs are able to get are going to be eliminated. Right. So that just forces them to once again resort back to what they know.
Good point.
Which is hustling. So then it's still a cycle. So until we can, I guess, cross technology, media, and self-reliance and put them all together, or either eliminate one, you're not going to be able to.
I was looking at, I remember had been posting a lot of stuff, going to balls and stuff during the Christmas break, and you know, here I am, a tuxedo, wife has on the gown, and then there was some vacation pictures, and I had somebody's like, oh man, you guys must be living the life. Things are going great for you guys, you know, because, you know, here we are looking at, looking like Kim and Kanye or something. And I'm sitting there like, that is not my life at all. But I'm not going to post me sitting at work grinding. You know what I'm saying? You're looking at a short moment of time that lasts about an hour and a half. I'm sitting there tired after work, like ready to go home. But let me smile for the camera right here. You know what I mean? But you know, but so often, even with this social media, people have their Instagram posts and all the different angles, like they are completely Hollywood for their entire lives. And a lot of people don't see the grind that goes on the other 99.999% of the time.
Do you see that as being a make-believe reality?
It's a make-believe reality. It is made up. And a lot of people believe that, you know, well, if my life is not like that, then obviously something is wrong. So you start to worship things that are not in reality.
And you're willing to do things
and you start to do
outside
things
of yourself that'll.
So now you think you need
that immediately, so I can fit in.
Well, that just
and then you have the music. You listen to the car on YouTube where you're supposed to shake it up and you get all that money. And it doesn't work that way.
Is that well, you know,
without consequences?
Yeah.
Illusions of grandeur.
Well, does that lead to a person potentially being stuck? Here you didn't get talked to in your mother's womb, and now all of a sudden you being conditioned by what you do listen to. So are you now in the creation, Matthew, do you see a creation of a make-believe world? Or you see students who, you know, want to make believe they're going to be these people?
Oh, absolutely. They, not only students, but even grown women that I mentor or adults, trying to be something that you're not. And you know that's not you,
Right.
but you're trying to be something that you're not. The old proverb, to thine own self be true. The good, the bad, the ugly. Nobody's perfect, but a lot of times we see, the stars and the cars and the the lights and the cameras and all that, and people aspire to do that. Or maybe it's just not that high end. You want to go into a profession. I see a lot of times with collegiate students, I want to be an attorney. I want to be an engineer. But you can't even process the basic communication skills.
But why
And I
do they
try to
want to
give
do
you-
that though? Most of the time,
Because-
because of the money.
Because of the money, and they think it's going to be fast money, going to get it fast, and you're going to help me. You're going to help me get this A. You're going to help me, and I'm not going to do any work. I'm not even going to purchase the book.
Right?
But you want to go to law school and be an attorney. I'm not even, but you want to be an engineer. That takes time and creativity, and you
Right.
Well, look,
illusions of grandeur.
we only have 10 minutes. How do we help? Give me some closing comments. How do we help these people wake up?
Wake up.
Huh?
Well, like you said, I'm gonna start way back, like Dr. Higgins said.
Right.
Let's start real young.
Right.
And I'm gonna say some things, and I'm gonna probably get some emails and post about. But it's reality.
Okay.
If we're gonna start that young, let's start that young, because we see a lot of individuals who are letting their kids try to decide what they're going to be, or their our parents that are projecting
Right.
images on their kids.
On their children.
When you
right.
see, third graders saying that, "Mommy, I want to have a sex change," that to me does not come from a 5 or 6 year old.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, in my mind, it just doesn't equate.
Right.
Someone has to put those on there. Or if you have the 11-year-old with a 13-inch tracks in her hair and lipstick and makeup and stuff in her bra,
Right.
someone is giving them the impression that
That's
it's
right.
okay to do that.
That's right.
And no one is correcting and chastising it, and it just continues to grow and get worse from there. So I do agree we need to start at home with the with the parenting, and we can go from there.
Yeah, I would say that at-home parenting from the womb. Basically, as a child psychiatrist who sees adults as well, I can predict your life based upon about 30 minutes.
What?
Who are the two people who made you? The two people who made you. When your mom and dad met at the club or at school, and what was their life about is going to tell you what your life is going to be about. And as a treating provider, in order to help, I know that I've got to do a paradigm change sometimes.
Right.
Like a whole lot of things got to shift in order for it to get you on a different page, which requires the parent, the family, and the home needs to shift. The circle around the kid needs to shift. But honestly, if I had to give a closing comment, at some point you have to understand the situation that we're in as black people. The issue of racism and the issue of white supremacy and all the factors that go into working against us. And once you understand the paradigm, you can clearly see what the decision making that we do, that I do, that others do in our community, or I would say even the poor do, or those who are hooked on drugs. You got to see the paradigm of what's going on and then shift yourself and understand that understand that what we see in the visual images that we see are controlled on what's going to be positive, what is seen to be something to be as good. You don't have the shows like, I don't know, Leave It to Beaver to show you what a positive family looks like. Now, of course, they didn't include many of us in that. The
Cosby Show.
Yeah. Cosby didn't. Those are times from before.
The show.
The Huxtables. Let's call it the Huxtables.
All right, there you go. It's the Huxtable. Yes,
When we had the Huxtables. But those images are not celebrated anymore of being something positive.
Right.
And I do not remember her pulling out with her, Lamborghini and him stepping out of his Bentley in that show to show positivity in a family and a home on what looks to be a strong nuclear situation.
They had a Volvo, I remember, in a van, like this, like 18 van on the first season.
Yeah, so we gotta realize where we are, what we're seeing, what we're dealing with, and what we're fighting against, and realizing that those go to some very small places that produce so many things, and this loss of mental consciousness of who we are and what we're trying to do.
Well, I think that leadership in our political system should become leaders, and like Governor Abbott has done, become transparent, challenge the status quo, the businesses, the Greater Houston Partnerships and others, to be a part of this this movement, investing the money. I think Warren Buffett said it best, that philanthropy work were good investments. I think Bill Gates and what they're doing with the computer system, with the prison inmates, to get them acclimated with transition, those type of initiatives is what's going to require. I think the faith community is going to have to get away from conventional church. I mean, worship is one thing, but ministry is another thing. And we need to have the structure. We need to bring in the resources who have the knowledge about these type of structures so that we can do business, because it takes money to do ministry. We can't do this on just prayer. Now, I believe in prayer, but I need also $20 million to go along with prayer so that we can implement some how-to ways to do the kind of things. And this, we need parenting skills. We need mental health counselors and expertise like Dr. Higgins, who's here, yourself, and Professor Gilmore, who's a great teacher and professor, so that we can give our children a chance. I mean, I hate to think that my parents or grandmother and them have misled me, misguided me, have put on me pseudo misconceptions about this illusion about who I should be, and allow me to disown my identity or who God made me to be.
Right.
So I think we need to get to a place of understanding who we are, what we're good at, focus on the strengths, and become the best you. That's what I'm talking about in 2019.
Right.
Yeah. As an educator, I'm going to go education.
Right.
I think education is the key. I'm a staunch believer in education and in the trainings. I'm often reminded of the late Maya Angelou and one of her powerful quotes. And she said, if you don't like the direction and the path that you're going in, you can always get off that road and create yourself a new path and a new direction. And I think that comes with knowledge and understanding. I got to understand myself. I've got to know myself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and do what's best for me, that's beneficial for me. When I can help myself, first I've got to take the oxygen mask and put it on myself first. I can't help anybody else until I am able to breathe. Once I am able to breathe and help myself, then I am able to help other people. That starts with knowledge, and knowledge starts with education.
Well, I think certainly tonight's discussion, public affairs, public access, has given many of you some understanding, whether it's small or large, of the dynamics required for you to be effective in addressing individuals, whether in your family or yourself. And I think as we go through life, at some point, people have got to look at the mirror and see what it is required, what you need to do, and how you can get resource support. All of us see in the news every day situations and circumstances which make no sense. Loved ones, murder, suicides, people who are supposed to be outstanding representatives of law enforcement or whatever the case is, doing things that you would not expect.
Pastor Rive stealing $1.5 million.
Yes, and so we can look at and think about all of these abnormal behaviors and then say to ourselves, how did that happen? It happens because, you know, the reality is mental illness is a reality, mental disorders is a reality, and then spiritual dynamics, and no spiritual dynamics is a reality. And you got to have your children trained and ready so they can become mature adults and take over and do a better job. I'm closing by making this statement and thanking all the guests at the round table tonight. But I often ask the question, in 20 years, where will we be? What will this society be like? Hopefully people will listen, whether it's from the governor's office or education institutions or, and as it relates to education, parenting, as Dr. Higgins was saying, and how early we need our children to be influenced, like Sir Nemesis Truth was saying, because if it's like this today, you got to ask yourself, how is it going to be 20 years from now? Hopefully we'll be able to say that we made some type of impact. Look forward to more information, hopefully being shared not only here at Public Affairs, Public Access, Houston Media Source, but we're going to be having some activities in our community. And we want you to be able to respond and let us know how we can be of some further benefit to you, your church, your school, your community, and your life. I'm Robert McKinley Gilmore Sr. I want to thank all of my guests tonight. Thank you very much for joining us right here, Public Affairs, Public Access, at the Houston Media Source. It's been a great show. Hope you have a good evening.